Right, we are at 7 o'clock. Helen, do you want to make a quick start? I'll keep an eye on letting everyone in, and then I know we've got a pretty tight agenda, so we want to be and we want people away. We don't want anyone staying later than 9 o'clock. So I'll keep an eye on the lobby if you want to make a start.
And then yes, that's super. So thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. As we've said, we are expecting about 100 and just short of 150 people, so that's absolutely fantastic. We've got a packed agenda. We've got Lado, and that's going to be Andy Kenyon, and we've got Gemma from doing a presentation on MACE, and that's a great presentation. Then some updates from Kat. You might not have met Kat before because usually it's Hayden who's here, but Kat and Hayden obviously work very closely together. And then some sort of updates from me as well, and then hopefully we've left a little bit of time at the end for questions and things. It is being recorded, but when we get to the questions at the end, we will come off recording, so your questions and things won't be recorded for obvious reasons, just to ensure that you can have that freedom to ask whatever you want to ask, really. So yeah, hopefully you've got a drink, hopefully you've got a blanket. I know you'll all have had really, really busy days, so we really do appreciate you sort of taking time out this evening to sort of join us for this safeguarding online learning. So I will hand over to Kat for the housekeeping, if that's all right, Kat.
Yeah, that's fine. Helen, if you can just keep an eye on the lobby for me, so I think there are still people coming in. We've covered most of this off already, so basically just a little bit of housekeeping for you. I think you are all on mute at the minute, but it just means that because we're recording the session, it cuts out a little bit of the background noise. Please do ask questions in the chat. We will pick them up as we go along. We've got some brilliant kind of guest speakers joining you today. If you don't have a function in the chat bar, I know someone's raised that they've got that problem today. We will kind of stay on at the end of the session, so please feel free to kind of wave at us, catch us, and I'll stop the recording for that as well, just in case there's anyone feeling uncomfortable with doing that on the video. In terms of accessing the presentation, like I said, we always record these and we'll pop it on our YouTube channel. Just go onto YouTube, look for NYSCP, and we'll come up straight away. And you can like and subscribe as well, and then you'll get a notification when it comes on. And then following the course, you'll get a questionnaire through from NYS where you've done your booking with, and then that'll give you the certificate of attendance. Helen's already touched on the agenda, but I'll be starting you off this morning. You can tell it's nearly the end of the day, this evening, with partnership updates. Andy's going to join us at 7:15 for some key information about the Lado. Gemma's joining us from the world of child exploitation, just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of that and how it's really important for kind of early years staff to have that awareness. I'm going to share with you a really key campaign that we've done as a partnership around #AskMe. Hopefully you've heard of it, but it'll just be a chance for you to kind of refresh what it's all about and how helpful it is. And then you've got Helen, who's going to give you some final updates. We will get you away for 9 o'clock. We've given ourselves a little bit of a window for if you want to ask some questions. As we've said, my name's Kat Morrison. I'm a Policy and Development Officer for the partnership, so a very similar role to Hayden, and I'm just covering this for Hayden this evening. So let's make a start. So just to kind of kick off with some of the business unit updates for you and just some of the key headlines of things to be keeping a lookout for. The big piece of work that is probably just come out over the last couple of weeks, I think you're probably hot off the press in terms of the first group I've shared it with, is we have just published our annual report. So as a business unit, as a partnership, we have to publish an annual assurance report, judging the effectiveness of our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements to safeguard and promote the welfare of all children and young people right across North Yorkshire. And it's a chance to really see some of the highlights of the work that's been completed by the partnership over the last 12 months and the impact that's had. Part of that report is we highlight our priorities for 2024 and 2025, and you can see them there. Our key priorities are around criminal and sexual exploitation, strengthening the role of education in the partnership. I'm going to touch on working together in the next slide, but obviously education and childcare providers wasn't named as the fourth statutory partner in the reiteration of working together, but obviously the role of education and childcare providers is really key, and we see them as a really key relevant agency in our safeguarding arrangements. So we really want to kind of make sure that we are including them in all of our arrangements now. Another one, I don't think it'll be any surprise to you, in terms of children and young people's emotional and mental health and online safety as well. So with regards to working together, hopefully you were all aware that we did have a new iteration of the document that came out. It was a lovely Christmas present in December 2023. But as a partnership, we have to be in a position to publish nationally what those changes to working together to safeguard children mean for us and our partnership and our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements by December 2024, which is rapidly approaching. As we've had about a year of planning for this, we've been having monthly operational task and finish group meetings where we've had partners from right across the board. Helen's been part of that meeting as well. And it's always been looking at kind of how we can support partners to implement those changes, understand those changes, and primarily kind of continue to work in partnership and build on those partnership arrangements. Now, there is an expectation that everyone has an understanding of working together to safeguard children, and some of those key elements and what some of those key changes are. It's a whopper of a document. It's hundreds of pages long, and it's a big ask to ask professionals and volunteers to kind of sit through all that. So basically, as a business unit, what we've done is we've broken that down for you, and we have a web page on our partnership site. So if you go to the About Us drop down, there is a tab that says Worried About Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023. And that's a really key breakdown of what all the document covers, why it's important, what the changes were. And we've tried to kind of present that information in really sort of quick, useful way. So you've got a printable 1-minute guide for professionals, and we've also done one for parents and carers as well. We've done a recording. It's probably about 10-15 minutes long, which just kind of highlights the changes. So again, you can take that back to your teams and you can use that in kind of staff training if you want to give them that overview of the main pieces of work. And then, like I say, keep a lookout. We will be publishing our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements as an updated document in December 2024. Another key thing to be aware of is we will be holding a learning event on the 4th of December. So it's going to be a 2-hour-long session over the lunch break, but that will be a multi-agency learning event. So we'll have partners from police, health services, local authority. We'll be there from the business unit. We'll have education partners there, voluntary sector partners. And it's all around kind of what those changes to working together have meant for them and how they've implemented them and how we are working together. So a really useful insight into kind of how those safeguarding arrangements work right across the field. We will record it, but I would strongly advise come along and be part of some of those discussions. As a business unit, like I said, the webpage is there for you. We've also had the pretty mammoth task of reviewing all of our practice guidance and 1-minute guides, which we are working through. We're pretty much there. But what you will find now on our website is we've put a date at the bottom of every document. So if you're picking up a 1-minute guide or a piece of practice guidance, you'll see the date that was last reviewed on the bottom, just so you can see that that's the most up-to-date version. We will always say don't download them and save them in a Word file or anything like that, because we will change them whether or not there's been a change of language or terminology. So the trick is to always just go back to the website, and that's where you'll find the most up-to-date version. I won't go through all these, but these are just kind of a highlight of some of the documents that we've looked at into a little bit more detail. Really key ones that I want you to take some time to have a look at if you get chances: professional curiosity and managing different professional perspectives. We've had a task and finish group looking at these for about a year, and we've really kind of rewritten these documents all around the importance of professional curiosity, understanding those different perspectives. It's something that comes up time and time again through all of our learning reviews, all of our audits, this need for a little bit more curiosity. So please do take the time to have a look at those documents, and we will be having a learning event in November for that as well, so you can access that. You can scan the QR. You will get these slides afterwards, so the QRs will be available, and that will take you to all of our documents. Just a reminder as well, sorry, I've scanned on. We do have TriX, which runs alongside our North Yorkshire practice guidance, and TriX provides some national guidance as well. So that you can link to that from our documents page. We're currently working on some pretty big pieces of strategy update at the minute. So we've got a bit of a timeline that will take us into the new year with some of our key pieces of work. The first of which is in relation to being young in North Yorkshire, which the best way I can describe this is kind of our umbrella strategy. This is the one in which all of our other pieces of work sit under. And that's kind of based around our 4 key priorities of where we want young people to be happy, healthy, safe and achieving. So we're building that at the minute. We want to kind of know what that means for young people, families and practitioners right across North Yorkshire, so we can start to kind of think about what we want our key priorities to be moving forwards. We've done some consultation events for both this and our early help strategy. And we had well over 100 people attend over the summer. We started to pick up really good elements of practice and building in those family perspectives. And we're in the process of collating all that and putting it together as a draft report, which will go to the executive in January for publication. If there's things that you feel like you want to share, or if you're feeling really strongly about, you know, this needs to be part of our strategy, this is a real priority for us in early years and childcare settings, please do talk to us, because we want to hear from everybody right across the board. Alongside this, obviously, we'll be working on the development of our early help strategy. And that understanding of early help being a system rather than a service, and the fact that there's so many contributing factors to early help. It's not just around children and families service and the work that early help service do. Another key strategy that we're working on at the minute is in relation to the harmful sexual behaviour strategy. So earlier in the year we did an audit with the NSPCC, and we went right across all our providers to just kind of get an understanding of what this looked like in North Yorkshire, and that's been put together with a toolkit looking at that kind of shared approach, an agreement of the language and that recognition of behaviours. So that's due again towards the end of this year, early 2025. So some really key pieces to be keeping a lookout for. But of course, when we've got these sessions coming up in the future, when they're ready, we'll talk you through them. And if you've got any questions, you can sort of let us know. Another key one just to be aware of, hopefully you do use our website and you can kind of access that as a key resource, but over the summer we had a little bit of a tidy up and a refresh of our website, and we've changed it now, so you've got very clear entry portals. The main one, obviously, if you're worried about a child and how to make a referral, that's never going to go anywhere, that's our main one. But then you've got entry portals for professionals, children, young people, parents and carers and communities. In the professional section, we do have a drop down specifically for education and childcare providers. So we've put some key information on there as well that you can access, and that's alongside all of our kind of key documents, practice guidance, 1-minute guides and things like that. Again, this is a work in progress. So if you're looking at this website and you're thinking, actually, there's some really key bits that we feel that we want to be included on this, both for yourselves as professionals, but also whether there's key bits that go in the parents and carers bit from an early years perspective, or even the communities bit, please let us know, because you know we get those resources from the people out there doing the do, so we want to be able to kind of build it based on that. Just another kind of touch on another piece of campaign that you may find useful. York and North Yorkshire's safeguarding partnerships are raising awareness of who's in charge when an adult has been in drink or has used drugs. So sadly in 2020 we had 80 pedestrians that were killed or seriously injured by drink drivers. 20 children between the ages of 0 and 15 were killed or seriously injured by drink drivers in that year as well. So the campaign highlights safe sleeping and the effect that alcohol and drugs have on your body, and how drinking alcohol and drugs may make you less aware of your child's needs. I've popped on there some of the kind of social media images that we've put together as a business unit. We've also got some kind of wording for some tweets and key resources. That's all on the campaigns page on the website. QR's there for you that will take you, again, we've touched on these, to the procedures and practice guidance, and we've got our training page as well. I've already mentioned these, but these are our upcoming learning sessions. If you are searching, we have changed the language away. They were kind of commonly known as masterclasses, but we've changed them to learning sessions. So if you're kind of going on to NYS and you can't find them, but just search for NYSCP and everything that we deliver will come up and you will see those learning sessions. So we've got some great ones coming up to take us into 2025, which is really scary that 2025 is coming up so quickly. And then the last point from me, I just want to touch on the fact that we are in the process of developing a practitioner forum. So this is going to be an opportunity for frontline practitioners from right across the partnership to come together and help us shape service delivery, key messages, how we are delivering information to our frontline practitioners. This first meeting is a little bit of a kind of suck it and see, and it's just a chance for frontline practitioners to come, talk about what would be useful for them, what would be the best format to kind of get those feedbacks from frontline practitioners. So we're going to hold it on the 13th over lunchtime. It's going to be really informal, but if you are interested in coming, we aren't popping it on NYS. We're just asking if you can email us at nyscp.gov.uk and then we'll send you the Teams link. But we would love to have some kind of early years providers in there as well, to kind of help get that perspective into the working group. That's it from me from a business unit perspective. I will hopefully hand over to Andy. Is Andy with us?
Yep, I am.
Welcome, Andy. Over to you. Just tell me when to move the slides across.
Yep, okay. Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Kat said, you know, they're not masterclasses now. We've changed the name. What I'm going to do is really still just cover the role of LADO, and what the process is. I don't like to do scenarios because every individual case, I'm sure you'll understand, is different. However, at the end, I am going to do a case study, which hopefully, you know, you'll be able to gain some learning from. So I'll start off with what the role of LADO is, and that's statutory based. So next one, Kat. So that's within Working Together to Safeguard Children, 2023. It's managing, having oversight of individual cases, provision of advice and guidance to employers and voluntary organisation, liaison with the police, other agencies, regulatory bodies such as Ofsted, DBS, Teachers Regulation Agency, monitoring of cases to make sure they're dealt with as quickly as possible and are consistent, thorough and fair, and ensuring future safeguards. So that's including LADO outcomes, references, which I'll come on to. Next one, Kat. Okay, the important this is what we try and stress is the LADO does not have an investigatory function. Okay, there's 3 posts across North Yorkshire. There's myself, Joe, and Karen and Julie do a job share for the other post. So, you know, we currently have around 60 to 80 cases each. So to investigate those would be an impossibility. So when you're thinking about LADO, what I'd like you to really think about is that the LADO process sits behind any criminal or employment/disciplinary proceedings. Bottom line is if there is an allegation that it should be reported to us within 24 hours, we'll work with yourselves, police if they're involved, or any other agencies. And at the end of the employment outcome, that's when we'll decide on the LADO outcome. So we don't influence the employment process. We will be waiting for yourselves as employers to conduct your own inquiries and procedures alongside your policies. So when the LADO is involved, we're notified, but for the individual, I think a lot of them think that LADO's doing another investigation, and that is not the case. Okay, Kat. So what is an allegation? So it's alleged that a person who works or volunteers with children has behaved in a way that has harmed a child or may have harmed a child. And when we're talking harm, it's the lower threshold. So we're not talking child protection, significant harm. It's harm. It's ill treatment or impairment of health or development, or impairment suffered from seeing or hearing the ill treatment of another person, physical, emotional, sexual. So it is quite wide ranging, but that's behaved in a way that has harmed a child. The second one, possibly committed a criminal offence against or related to a child. Next one, Kat. Behaved towards a child or children in a way that indicates he or she may pose a risk of harm to children. And finally, the fourth category that was added a couple of years ago, behaved or may have behaved in a way that indicates they may not be suitable to work with children. This fourth category is really looking at behaviours outside of work, be it within their own home, and we're talking potential child protection issues in respect of their own children, domestic violence at home, or possibly even assaults out on a night out, depending on the seriousness of that behaviour, or any other behaviours people feel relevant. What the LADO is not there for is not to manage complaints against settings. It's specifically against an individual or individuals who work with children. So we're looking at specific allegations. If you receive a complaint about general behaviour of staff, or the setting isn't doing this properly, then that is a complaint, and that for yourselves to deal with under your complaints procedures. Obviously, you can receive what's called a complaint, and within it there may be specific allegations against individuals, and therefore that should be considered potentially under us if any of the above 4 points have been reached. Okay, Kat. So there are several ways. My manager asked me to include this just so you're aware really that it can come from different angles. Disclosures from children, observations from staff, and again, thinking about that as your setting got a whistleblowing policy. Do staff know when and how to report? Self-reporting by staff members. If an individual realises they've actually done something wrong and approach you to inform you. Direct allegations from parents and staff, as just discussed, or other professionals. Complaints, which I've already touched on. Whistleblowing. Concerns from management. or potentially accumulative low-level concerns. So where you may have recorded a low-level concern, persons maybe handled a child just incorrectly, which isn't an allegation of harm, so you record that as low level. But then you get maybe another 2 or 3, and you're thinking you've already provided them training, and yet they still aren't getting the message on how to deal with it. Then maybe you may need to consider whether or not a referral is relevant. And obviously, we can receive concerns directly to LADO from parents, staff, professionals, regulators. Certainly, a lot of parents tend to go to Ofsted these days, and Ofsted will come to us in the first instance. Again, we look at it, review whether or not it's against an individual or more general. So obviously several ways to be aware of how complaints can come to you. Okay, Kat. Okay, so if your the allegation is clear and obvious, that you believe it reaches one of the criteria that we've gone through, then please make a notification to us straight away, and that can be that's on the site that Kat went through, the NYSCP site, professionals and LADOs listed on there. We're trying, should I say, to go away from the word referral and use notifications, because some people struggle with a referral and they're still not sure. So we're trying to use it as call it a notification form. So please be aware of that. If you are unsure, then you can contact the duty LADO. One of us is duty Monday to Friday, 8:30 till 5. And if you ask to speak to duty LADO, you will be asked some details by our admin colleagues. They will ask you for the staff member's name and details and a brief overview, so that they can then just alert us to what the inquiry is about. All our contact details are on the last slide of this presentation. And our mantra, I'll probably repeat it again: if in doubt, consult. What we don't want is an investigation to have taken place, and after a week you ring us and say, "Oh, I've done all this investigation," when actually we should have been alerted when the allegation was first received, so that we can discuss with you ways forward and the right course where we should be heading. Okay, Kat. Okay, so when you have a discussion with ourselves, we believe it does meet the LADO threshold. I'll just go back, because if it doesn't reach the threshold, then we'll record it as a consultation and you will receive an email from us, so you've got a record of our conversation and our decision. Potentially we may be unsure if it's limited information, so what we may say is that we'll hold it and we'll send an email out with some further actions for you to carry out, and then come back to us so we can decide. But if it does meet the threshold, then we need to be considering, has a child suffered or be at risk of suffering significant harm? In that case, a strategy meeting would be led by children's social care. After that, we would normally hold a LADO in respect of the subject who the allegation is against. We try and hold that after the strategy meeting, so we're not repeating the information. If a criminal offence has been committed but no evidence of significant harm that'll be an allegations meeting, and that would be with the police and yourselves. And then obviously again, if that individual's behaved towards a child or may pose a risk of harm, that'll be, if the police aren't involved, that'll be a discussion with yourselves or potentially an allegations meeting. If it does meet our threshold, again, after initial discussion, you will receive an email. Again, that will contain the guidance of what we've agreed, the next steps, and whether or not we're going to have a meeting. Okay, Kat. Okay, possible cases. Again, it's just thinking wider of just the workplace. Allegations in direct relation to current work, where the individual role is working with children, and the allegation is in relation to that role, and that's probably the most straightforward one. Allegations in relation to their own children. Obviously, you know, if individuals' own children are on a child protection plan, then that means that professionals have deemed them to be at risk of significant harm, and therefore we need to consider their role where they are working with children. That is all about considering whether there's transferable risk. But as soon as you find out if that is the case, then a referral should be made to ourselves. If it is going down the CP route, if you're not aware, I certainly would have expected a social worker that's involved to be making a referral to us. Again, what I'd like to point out is just because there's a referral to LADO doesn't mean the end of a person's career. I'll come on to the outcomes, but it's although it's not a nice procedure to follow through and be aware of it, then but you know, it does provide protection for staff as well. So it could be allegation in relation to other work, volunteering with children, sports coaches, scouts, guiding. I'm managing a case at the minute where a teacher's involved in English cricket, scouts, judo, with the church. So if there's an allegation against them where they work or volunteer with children, then we need to consider that individual's role, any other roles working with children, and we would invite and make those agencies aware, and they would be involved within the meeting. Non-recent allegations, anything over 12 months, that could be someone who's working with you or for you, and an allegation is made from 3 or 4 years previously. We need to consider their current employment, whether there's transferable risk. Is it serious enough for them to be suspended or not? Can they carry on it within their role if that is feasible? And also, if an allegation is made against an individual, be aware that we will do checks with the police. So the VAT is the vulnerable assessment team, and we will submit a check to them for information. And there can be occasions where further information about the individual is disclosed, which is not on the DBS. So it didn't meet criteria to be disclosed by the police DBS team, but there's potentially intelligence or low-level incidents investigations that were maybe no further actioned, and they can be shared, so may be shared at the meeting if the police disclose it. I've currently got an allegation that came through last week in relation to someone's behaviour to another colleague in a setting, and I've done a check, and actually the individual's has previously been investigated for a serious offence that's not been disclosed on the DBS, and there were also subject to a LADO investigation last year, and that correctly was not shared on the reference as instructed by ourselves. However, with the current allegation and then looking at the previous information, we're starting to draw a little bit of a pattern. So just be aware that if you end up in a meeting with ourselves, you could receive information that you were unaware of through the DBS. Okay, thanks, Kat. Okay, so if you are invited to allegations meeting, that will be chaired by the relevant LADO. If the police are involved, relevant police person will be there. And then from an employment point of view, obviously it depends on the status of or how your setting is structured, either be it the manager, owner, might be both, deputy manager as well, who you feel is relevant. HR, we normally ask HR attendance. Now, appreciate that a lot of the smaller settings don't have specific HR advice. I think if you don't have an arrangement to receive HR advice, I think it's something that you should be considering, so you would know where to go if an allegation does arise. And the social worker, if there is one involved, and any other relevant agencies. So within that meeting, we'll look at the details of the allegation, the actions that have been taken initially. We'd look at the children involved in the allegation. Are they safe and secure? Do we need to consider referrals to children's social care on that? And then we'll start to look at the picture of the individual who's subject to the allegation. So I would be asking the employer, what references did you receive? Previous concerns or allegations? Is current DBS up to date? Do they have any other work with children for the reasons I've just mentioned in the previous slide? And also consideration of their own children. Now, just because we have an allegation against an individual at work doesn't mean we're automatically going to refer their own children. It's going to depend on the seriousness of the allegation. If we do think that they're at risk of significant harm, then we will ask for referrals to be made to children's social care on their own children, and that's for social care to conduct their own assessment. We then move on to discussions on next steps. If it's police, then normally police will take priority, and whether or not the employer can start anything and agree timescales. If police are involved, then you've got to be prepared that it could be several months potentially. Again, it's going to depend on the nature of the allegation. We'll then discuss welfare for the staff member who's subject of the allegation. Do they have a specific line of support? Do they need to be directed to any other support areas? And so that they have a clear line of support and someone they can contact. Then agree the actions and set a review date depending on the allegation. If we can reach an outcome at that point, then we would do. And we also, at the final meeting, will look at any lessons learned from that incident. Okay, thanks, Kat. Okay, suspension. Obviously, suspensions considered where there's cause to suspect the child or other children at the workplace are potentially at risk of significant harm, or the allegation is so serious there may be grounds for dismissal. And it can also be considered where it's necessary to allow any investigation to proceed unimpeded. If there are several members of staff that are witnesses to the incident, then we'd have to consider whether or not it's really appropriate for that individual to be in at work. but that's what we would talk through with yourselves. What I will say around suspension is we will offer guidance. The final decision is the employer's. And if we're at that stage, we would be advising HR advice as well. Okay, Kat? Okay. When we are making decisions and considering cases, and this is what I don't like to do scenarios, because every case is so different, but we'll be asking about the training. Is the CCTV witnesses? Are there any previous incidents, allegations, complaints or discipline against that individual? How much training have they had, both individually and staff? Potentially issues in their personal life, and also procedures followed. So they're the types of things that we're looking at and need to consider when we're deciding whether or not it reaches our threshold. So once the employment decision, the investigation's been completed, and a decision has been made around the individual, we'll look at concluding it from a LADO perspective. So we're looking and considering, is the allegation substantiated? Is there sufficient evidence to prove the allegation? What we'll say is this decision is made on the balance of probabilities. So if there's a police investigation, they're looking to prove beyond all reasonable doubt. If the police take no further action, then that is not the end of the matter. It is then down to the employer, and we're considering it, as I say, on the balance of probability. So it's a lot less. If the threshold balance probability is 50-50, the police threshold is roughly 90-95% proof. That's what they're looking at. So worst case scenario, in the more serious cases, the subject is dismissed or removed from regulated activity. If that is the case, then you will be advised to submit a referral to DBS, and also any future reference for that individual must include the substantiated allegation. Some people do get hung up on making the referrals to DBS and say, oh, it's not for me to make a decision. It is a process. As the employer, if they're dismissed from regulated activity, your duty is to make a referral and inform DBS. What happens after that is down to DBS. I have no involvement in it. It is a separate process by which they will conduct their own inquiries. They will probably ask LADO for the information, and probably ask yourselves as a setting for any relevant information as well. We don't even get to find out if what decision's been made unless we have a legitimate interest, which is very narrow and specific. So again, if the allegation could be substantiated, but the individual isn't dismissed, and this is where the allegation again is referred to in any future reference by the employer, but it doesn't mean the subject cannot work with children in the future. For example, I had a teacher who had a disclosure from a child that they'd been hit at home. The teacher she was busy, and at the end of the day did make a record, but then followed it up the next day. Well, that teacher knew that child was on a child protection plan for physical harm. She'd been to some of the meetings involving the child, and she was also part of the safeguarding lead for the school. So when we looked at that, it was really a neglect of duty, because she let the child go home without taking any action and alerting authorities. But whilst the investigation was ongoing, that teacher was offered the opportunity to work at another school, and she took it. and all we did was ensure that the next school were aware of the ongoing allegation. The teacher had disclosed it, been quite open about it correctly, and that just allowed the next employer to consider any risk and any safeguarding risk assessment that they needed to take place. So it's not about preventing people working with children, but it is about alerting future employers so they can assess the risk. So I hope those two distinctions make sense. Probably everything that we've discussed, it's the individual who's been subject to the allegation. And I always say that I can't take away the pain of that. It's, not an easy time, especially if it does drag on a bit, and it's upsetting. It's very much how it's managed by yourselves and keeping people up to date, and as I say, ensuring the right processes are followed, and that part of that is understanding this process. But we can't take away the pain and the difficulty of it. I've been through it myself, and it isn't nice. But if the allegation is not substantiated, then we have these 4 outcomes. So unsubstantiated, there is insufficient evidence to prove or disprove the allegation. More often than not, that is word v word, and we can't say either way. There's no corroborating evidence either way. Unfounded, there is no evidence or proper basis which supports the allegation being made. Now, an example I try and use for that is that somebody sees something across the room and report it in good faith, following procedures, and actually further inquiries that show that another witness from another angle saw that actually the individual had been acting correctly and there was no concerns. So it was made in good faith, but there was no evidence or proper basis supporting that allegation. Allegation is false, that we can actually disprove the allegation, CCTV or specific witnesses, or it's malicious. There's a sufficient evidence to disprove the allegation and there has been a deliberate act to deceive. So any of those 4 outcomes basically mean that the ladder will advise you to record that on their HR file, the individual's personnel file, and you'll get an email from us detailing that that's the outcome that we've agreed and how you should store and record it, and also that it does not need to be referred to in a future reference because of those outcomes, and that's listed on the email you would receive from us. So as I say, for want of a better word, it tries to avoid a cloud hanging over that individual, whereas previously allegations would just, oh, they had an allegation, I'm not happy about them. Actually, it does draw a line under it, and hopefully allows the individual to move on, and for you as an employer to be absolutely clear, have a clear direction and understanding how to record it and what you need to do with any future reference. I hope that is clear. Kat, next one. I actually added this slide to, I gave a talk to residential care workers, and it was really about trying to engage. I was asked to just try and engage with them, and I added this slide. I think this is a real good one for you to take back and discuss in team meetings. You sort of would like to think that everyone will do this all of the time, but these are things really that come to our attention. So for everybody, really, be professional, show integrity, be truthful, open and honest. If a mistake's made, then, disclose it. Follow the policy for your setting, the training and guidance. Know your children, understand any plans and risk assessments, And what I'm talking about there is potentially children who maybe are vulnerable, have maybe disabilities, you know, ensure staff are aware of them, because what we sometimes find is, you know, people can just be lax and forget about the, you know, full details behind that child. You know, and understanding, knowing the children that they're working with is important. Teamwork, you know, I'm sure you all stress that, but it's about backing each other up, especially if a colleague sees someone who's maybe just, I don't want to exaggerate, but getting just a little bit of red mist, asking them just to step back. I'll take over from that, because it's, you know, the child's not responding to you, they're still crying and you're starting to get a bit riled up. It's about teamwork, you know, just step back. And it's important for that individual to listen to what their colleagues saying to them and step away. Ensure that recordings are correct and timely, and when writing an account, provide detail. You know, if I'm asking for an incident report the day after receiving an allegation and I get 2 lines saying, yeah, we had to move the child, he was wriggling, I put him down and then I went about my business. But actually the allegation is that they mishandled the child, they used physical force. You know, I can't make anything from that incident report. It's important to be able to assess the information. I went to a school incident last week, and the account from the teacher was 2 pages long. Now, I'm not expecting 2 pages for every incident. The actual scenario for this teacher, it actually did warrant that, but I want detail. I want to be able to understand what happened and why it happened. Has the individual informed a line manager, and any other suggestions? So, you know, what I would say is take that away and speak with your staff. Okay, so case study. I'm conscious I've got about 9 minutes left. Again, I just think everybody can learn from this, and they will see how it progressed, and the various mistakes, errors that were not done, and how important it is to follow policies and process. I can tell you that if this had been followed correctly, it would have been, I would say, done and dusted in 3 weeks, but it wasn't. So we had an allegation from a nursery child to parent that deputy manager had hit them, causing a black eye. It was reported to the police and social services by parent. So when that eventually came through to me, I called the manager, owner, who was adamant the incident cannot have occurred. Said deputy manager doesn't work in the same room. There was no accident or incident report because they were unaware that anything had happened, and nothing had been noticed when the child was handed over. So they were pretty much blaming the parent at that point. So in my conversations with the manager didn't disclose that the deputy manager is their daughter. And actually, I ended up going away on holiday and only found that when I came back. So I invited the manager to attend the allegations meeting, but due to the conflict of interest, and I'd warned the manager before the meeting that I was going to ask her to bring the meeting, the other agencies up to date with her actions, but then I asked her to leave, which she did. And I had further discussions with police, Ofsted and social care. After the meeting, I asked the manager to consider suspending the deputy manager, her daughter, which she refused to do. I will say she did want to engage and do something, but she refused to suspend her daughter. Later that same day, after the meeting, the deputy manager was arrested for assaulting the mother of the child. This is while the nursery is open. And an hour later, the manager and another staff member, who was another daughter of the manager, were arrested for witness intimidation. A busy afternoon, a Friday afternoon as well. As a result of that, nursery was suspended and subsequently closed by Ofsted. The individuals weren't charged with any criminal offences in the end, but their actions led to allegations being substantiated. I made referrals to DBS, and as I say, it was closed by Ofsted. So lessons learned. I'm conscious I've got 5 minutes. The LADO process is in place to safeguard children. As I say, we are not the fourth emergency service. If it's urgent, please contact police, children's social care. If you can't contact them for whatever reason, we are there to assist. But we, as I say, we sit behind those processes. The lesson learnt, as I said, following the process for the nursery I've just described would have led to an outcome which would have closed the matter for the deputy manager and the nursery of, well, probably unfounded. There's no basis to the initial allegation. However, their own actions, which were deviating from the process, led to the decisions. So out of that, other lessons learned for everybody: do you employ relatives or close friends? If so, it's not an offence, but what will you do in a situation as I've described if there's an allegation against them? Can you take that step back? Can you deal with that? If necessary, would you be prepared to take action against relatives or close friends employed by yourself? If you're not, then I would say that you need to look at who you do employ, because it can happen. You know, these things can come out of nowhere. We did have a case a few years ago where the owner of a nursery had to dismiss her own daughter due to an allegation. She followed things through correctly. If you do employ relatives or close friends, will you be able to conduct the investigation or discipline process impartially? If not, do you have a policy that covers this possibility? Do you have somebody else appointed who could do that? Also, just thinking about your local area, one of the issues we've had in some places when allegations occur, the locality surrounding the nursery, grievances outside of nursery brought into the setting. You know, can you manage that? Social media is always a difficult one. Again, if there is an allegation and it comes through to us, we will assist in guiding you and managing those sort of issues. So that is it, I believe. There's just one more slide, Kat, I think. Yep. So I say our managers, Marie Petman, Julie and Karen, cover the eastern area. I cover central, northern area, and colleague Joanne, the western area. The duty LADO number is there, 01609 533 080, or lado@northyorks.gov.uk. And I'd say notification form is on the NYSCP website. That's a minute to go. Any questions?
I suppose. gold star for keeping to time.
Oh,
yeah, so as we've said, we've put everything now on kind of one Lado page for on the NYSCP website. So please do go and take a look. It's got all the resources. Andy, do you want to, if anyone's got any questions for Andy, please pop them in the chat now, and then or Andy, are you happy to stay around till the end?
Yeah, I can
see if anyone's
stay
got
around.
anything.
Yeah.
I've been monitoring the chat bar, and there's nothing there, Andy, at the moment. But obviously, you know, if anybody wants to pop in anything, the one thing I would say is on your policies, and because we've been looking at the capital grant funding applications, we've noticed, or I've noticed on some safeguarding policies that providers have been putting, you know, like contact Susan Crawford, the Lado. Well, Susan Crawford, you know, retired sort of last Christmas. So again, just to emphasise what Andy said is, you know, don't put names down on your policies. Make sure your policies are up to date, but just put you'll contact the duty Lado at either that email or that telephone number, and then your policy is always up to date. And it's not because we work so closely with Ofsted. If an Ofsted inspector was going to look at your policy and saw Susan Crawford's name, they all know Susan retired last Christmas, so it would jump out at them like a I don't know what it would jump out at, but it would. So that's just another top tip.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Helen, I didn't include. I didn't even mention yourself, but you were part of the meeting I disclosed, and we would be contacting you straight away because I'd be asking you for your assistance.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'm going to move across and I'll invite Gemma to pick up. She's going to do 25 minutes looking at some of the multi-agency child exploitation work. So over to you, Gemma.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I hope everyone's well this evening, and thank you very much for having me. So my name's Gemma Orr, and I'm the operational MACE lead for the partnership at North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership. And part of that covers being the contextual safeguarding officer for the partnership. So just looking at the next slide, please, Cap. So just looking at some of the aims and objectives of the input tonight is just to give you a brief overview of what child exploitation is, looking at child sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation alongside county lines, looking at some key signs and indicators to look out for. A brief overview of what our MACE processes is, if there's any concerns around exploitation for a child, and then moving on to some key things that early year settings can consider, what you can then go on to do, and obviously then some further information and signs of support for yourselves as well. Next one, please, Kat. Okay, so contextual safeguarding is a term that was first coined by Dr. Carleen Furman, who does an awful lot of research around safeguarding and contextual safeguarding, and it looks at the places and spaces that young people spend their time and the harms that they might be exposed to within their communities, their school environments, their parks, their local bus stations or clubs, etc. So thinking of all those harms that are potentially there once they step outside of their own front door. And contextual exploitation looks at all those different topic areas in those various different coloured boxes there, and encompasses it all. It's obviously not a one-size-fits-all, but we do look at and consider all of those things within our exploitation arrangements. Next one, please, Kat. Okay, so looking at definitions of what child exploitation is, many cases differ to one another, and there's often finite things to look out for. But the Home Office defines child exploitation, often known as CCE, so criminal exploitation, where an individual or a group would take advantage of an imbalance of power to coerce, control and manipulate or deceive a child or young person under the age of 18. And that victim can still be criminally exploited even if that activity would appear consensual. It doesn't always have to involve physical contact. It can occur through the use of technology, so online criminal exploitation, and can often take place alongside other forms of exploitation, such as sexual exploitation or financial exploitation. And it's often broader than just county lines and include instances where young people or children are forced to work in cannabis farms, go on to commit thefts or burglaries, looking at pickpocketing to order, and also looking at threats towards other young people. And the Home Office defines child sexual exploitation, or CSE, Again, a very similar sort of explanation as to where somebody occurs where an individual or group would take advantage of an imbalance of power, again, that coercion and manipulation, or to deceive a young child or person under the age of 18 into sexual activity in exchange for something that victim needs or wants, and or for the financial advantage or increased status of that perpetrator or facilitator. And that victim, again, can still be exploited, sexually exploited, even if that sexual activity appears consensual. And again, this doesn't always have to happen or take place physically. It can also take place through the use of online technology as well. Next one, please, Kat. Okay, so alongside exploitation, you may have often heard the term county lines. And this is where gangs and organised criminal networks involved in exporting illegal drugs into more than one or different important areas within the UK, often using dedicated mobile phone lines or other forms of sort of deal lines to facilitate that movement of those drugs. They're often likely to exploit children and vulnerable adults in order to move and store the drugs and money, often using coercion, intimidation, often extreme violence as well, including sexual violence, and again, often with the use of weapons. And they're often highly organised criminal networks that use sophisticated and frequently evolving techniques in order to groom young people and vulnerable adults in order to evade capture from the police. So they often go hand in hand with criminal exploitation as well. Next slide, please, Kat. Okay, so looking at what child exploitation actually looks like in North Yorkshire, the first and foremost, most important thing to highlight is that despite North Yorkshire being a low crime, largely rural area, criminal and sexual exploitation of children absolutely happens here too. And unfortunately, it is taking place in some of the most places that you would often not think that it would be taking place. And that's the common misconception that it doesn't happen here in North Yorkshire, and exploitation is only an issue for larger cities and more urban areas to consider. And unfortunately, that's also what tends to be portrayed in the media, which unfortunately, looking at our figures and some of our victims of this, unfortunately isn't the case within North Yorkshire. It happens in towns and rural areas across our locality and affects all of the communities and children from various different walks of life. And criminals will target and groom children, often in rural areas, slightly differently to those living in cities. So they'll look at the lack of opportunities, look at more isolated areas, sort of boredom, lack of opportunities for excitement, and often offer those sort of exciting opportunities, attention, and opportunities to make easy money. And they'll look at potentially targeting young people within the country and the rural areas due to sort of less of police presence, less of professional eyes in certain areas, such as like the parks and bus terminals, for example, and also looking at sparse CCTV. It can often be quite hidden and the signs can be quite difficult to spot. And again, that requires people to be curious. Don't be afraid in respect of exploitation of ever being wrong, because I always say, what if that one time you were actually right? And that right referral or that right piece of information that gets shared in can often make a huge difference to safeguarding that child. Okay, next slide, please, Kat. Yeah, so looking at some of the key warning signs, again, these aren't always clear cut, can often be subtle, and especially when we're thinking around teenage age young people, which often exploitation is sort of geared towards, it can often be misconstrued as sort of teenage style behaviour, but these changes in behaviour can be an indicator. So again, it's really key to be curious. So thinking about those missing episodes during the day and also at night, changes in appearances and behaviours, changes of friendship groups and peer associates, both in real life and in online world, our social media world as well. Consideration of possessions, obviously there's new clothing and phones and money and drugs, but also looking at some of the credit crunch crisis that we're currently facing, and a lot of our families are facing. We are seeing young people and children exploited for the value of a McDonald's or for a hot meal or for even a top up on their electric or their gas cards at home. There's varying different coping mechanisms that we often see in hand with exploitation, such as alcohol, drugs and self-harm, even using sex as a form of self-harm. And again, looking at injuries that can't be explained or maybe have multiple explanations that don't appear to be correct or seem to add up. And again, looking at online use, being quite secretive and distancing themselves, spending more time online, or perhaps looking at different applications that might be out of character. And also considering new places, so discovering that they've been to new places with no obvious connection or means or facilitation of getting to that different place. Next slide, please, Kat. Okay, so just running you quickly through our MACE exploitation processes. So we look to cover exploitation across North Yorkshire, supporting young people who are at risk of exploitation as detailed in our MACE strategy. So if a child is identified by a professional as potentially being at risk of exploitation, then they should absolutely complete a safeguarding referral form that will be sent into our Children and Families Services, adhering to all usual guidance and practices around consent and information sharing. This referral is then received by the multi-agency screening team, also known as the MASS team, and that team consists of professionals from children's social care, from early help, from North Yorkshire Police and also our health colleagues. And the appropriate and relevant MASS professionals involved in that screening of the referral decide on the right service to meet the need for that child and their family. And again, look at the outcome of the screening. An allocated worker may then be allocated to the child and the family alongside other professionals who are already involved to try and help identify the risks around that child, what they might be exposed to. And if there's any exploitation concerns in relation to that child, then that allocated worker will go on to complete a form called the Child Exploitation Risk Assessment, often referred to as a CERA. And that contains the views of all those involved, including the child and the family, which is key to obviously help move things forward. So during the course of that discussion, if there's any specific contextual safeguarding concerns, so those concerns outside of that family home that link the child or young person to any locations that might present a risk of harm, or any individuals or groups or any perpetrators, then those themes and links are sent across to the MACE Level 2 meetings, which we'll go on to discuss in a little bit more detail in the next slide. Next slide, please, Kat. Okay, so we tackle exploitation across two different levels here in North Yorkshire. So the first one is the MACE Level 1 process. So if we're thinking about that child exploitation risk assessment, once that's completed, that assessment is then sent back into the MASS team, that multi-agency screening team, in order for them to have a view of the current risk level and scrutiny of that risk management around the child and any contextual safeguarding concerns that have emerged. And that allows partners to offer challenge regarding the risk level and risk management plans for that young person. And that case discussion takes place across those partners within that MASS team, alongside any other allocated workers or other key professionals that might be working with that child or the family. And the result of those discussions can be one of 4 outcomes. It can be high, medium, low or no risk, and then plans then put in place and reviewed on a regular basis, dependent upon that risk level that might be assigned. The MACE Level 2 meetings, a district area meeting, so there's 7 in total, and those meetings discuss information regarding the links between children at risk or subject of exploitation. We look at perpetrators or individuals who may pose a risk. We look at any different locations or community spaces, and we also look at community intelligence. And within those meetings, we look at 4 key components. So we look at the identification and assessment of any perpetrators or individuals who may pose a risk in that community area by exploitation. We look at the sharing of community intelligence, which is key to those MACE Level 2 meetings, and any of that intelligence that might be related to those perpetrators or individuals who may pose a risk. We look at identifying any community links between victims and perpetrators, how those two might be linked, where the harm might be coming from. And we can also really hone in some of those discussions through some locality mapping meetings, which often take place alongside the MACE Level 2 meetings, which look at key issues in a more in-depth and sort of closed setting to the wider MACE 2 meeting. And within those meetings, we also look to develop robust locality partnership action plans, so working in partnership with one another in order to develop that intelligence and at every opportunity pursue and prosecute any perpetrators and disrupt that exploitation and activity within the communities. So those MACE Level 2 meetings are the real key partnership meetings that we all attend, and obviously people are open and invited to attend and share information that's vital to that disruption of the exploitation. And there's absolutely no hierarchy within those meetings. All partners are absolutely welcome to attend those in order to share any key information, whether it be from police, from schools, from community or our voluntary sectors, all those who often have the most vital eyes and ears in the places and spaces where exploitation takes place. Next slide, please, Kat. So some key things for early year settings to consider. So despite exploitation often being honed towards the teenage years, there are key things that you guys within your settings will be really valuable to take away and consider when thinking about maybe younger siblings or younger children and potentially mixing with older peers. So looking at online use and sharing of devices with older siblings, there may be disclosures around concerning content that they might have seen if they share such devices with older siblings. There could be sort of sworn to unusual secrecy, especially around those online activities, and also having access to age inappropriate content from games and applications, but also to images and videos and messages that might be seen. A young child may also look at disclosures around a sibling or a parent, so a child expressing concern around that sibling or a parent potentially making a disclosure of harm within the nursery setting. For example, them disclosing that they maybe saw their brother or sister smoking something that smelt funny, or they were perhaps in company of an older person that didn't seem quite right, and then perhaps been sworn to secrecy about that, or even been threatened in order to keep that a secret from either parents or carers. Again, looking at behavioural indicators, so any sudden changes in behaviour for that child that might be out of character or might be unexplained. So thinking about mood swings and aggression, sort of withdrawal with that child if that seems out of character, alongside being frightened or fearful around certain people or places or talking about situations. And again, thinking about secretive behaviour, so anything that's unusually secret around that child, again, that seems out of character, especially around online activities or any shared devices that they might have. Also, a key thing to consider is physical indicators, so thinking about unexplained injuries, if that young child has perhaps been caught up in some of that exploitation, unexplained bruises or cuts, or things that maybe have multiple explanations that don't quite sit right, or don't quite add up, or are absolutely different to what the child is saying has happened. Thinking about neglectful situations, so poor hygiene and poor appearance that maybe has been a downgrade in the situation might indicate that there's some other issues in the wider setting or wider context that might need to be considered. And thinking again alongside repeated health issues, so perhaps frequent urinary infections, for example, any potential sexually transmitted infections or unexplained pain or injuries, again, that can't be explained or don't have a suitable explanation. Thinking about environmental indicators as well, so thinking about absenteeism, so frequent absentees or lateness without any clear reason. Again, thinking of that wider context, is there anything in the background that might need to be considered? Considering unexplained gifts, so not only would teenagers perhaps be in receipt of these, but parents as well can often be groomed alongside their children by the perpetrators. So other siblings again might be in possession of money or gifts or new items that can't be accounted for or perhaps seen beyond that family's needs or their financial means have been able to facilitate. And again, looking at any other associations of concern at older individuals and perhaps being seen with older children or adults who aren't family members and don't have sort of a reasonable explanation as to why they're involved or suddenly involved in that child's life. And that can all lead to some key emotional indicators to consider for the younger children as well. So perhaps a lowering of self-esteem, sudden drops in confidence, perhaps being overly worried, signs of anxiety or depression, Again, that's often relating to teenagers as well, but through some signs, obviously exploitation that we've seen over, especially our summer periods, it's often affected the siblings in as much as it has done with the actual victim of that exploitation. And again, thinking about a reluctance to engage or hesitation or refusal to take part in normal activities or converse in any sort of conversations around how they might be thinking or feeling, again, that might seem out of character for that child. And there's other key indicators around sort of sexualized behaviour for younger children, if there's anything inappropriate in relation to that sexualized behaviour. Perhaps knowledge beyond their age, where is that coming from? Again, thinking around that wider context in the background. And again, any signs of substance misuse, so any signs of drug, alcohol use, either by older siblings or perhaps by parent and carers as well. Next slide, please, Kat. So in terms of what you guys can go on to do within your settings, I think the first and foremost key thing is to understand exploitation and recognise some of those signs, because that's really key to that prevention, the early intervention and support being put in place. So things to consider would be sort of safeguarding policies, looking at training, having regular training on safeguarding, and also how to recognise the signs of exploitation. Correct reporting procedures, so clear guidance on how to report concerns, including who to contact within organisations and also external authorities if there's any help or assistance that might be needed. Thinking about documentation, so maintaining accurate records of any concerns or incidents, and although while ensuring confidentiality is maintained, any information or relevant information is then gone on to be shared with authorities where necessary, and supporting staff to share any relevant intelligence and information in that professional and correct manner as well. So things around using age-appropriate language, so from a very early age, using correct terminology to teach children the proper names of all body parts, including the genitals. Again, I appreciate this is quite a delicate topic to get right, but that absolutely helps that child to communicate from the earliest opportunity if anything is wrong with their body, if there's perhaps any safe or unsafe touch that needs to be considered, and thinking about some simple context around what is safe touch and what's unsafe touch, and using simple and clear language to explain concepts such as private parts and personal boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay, and the fact that it's okay for them to express how they feel with regards to that. Thinking around safe spaces, so ensuring that the nursery is a safe and supportive environment where the children feel comfortable and safe to express their concerns. Often in exploitative situations, those safe environments are really limited, so having a safe and trusted adult can absolutely mean the world to a child opening up and making a disclosure of harm. Considering online safety, so again from that earliest opportunity, teaching children alongside parents about the importance of staying safe online, and again using that age-appropriate language, age-appropriate applications and sites, and considering the online world as you would the local park and cinema, considering that stranger danger element, but also thinking of that and factoring that into your online world as well. And a reminder to parents alongside young children to also be cautious about the information that they're sharing, especially around images of their children and also personal information that can perhaps be used in exploitative content later down the line. Encouraging open communication, so feelings and emotions, so encouraging those children to talk about how they're feeling and reassuring them that it's absolutely okay to say no to uncomfortable situations, and that can then go on to talk to a trusted adult. So teaching children to identify trusted adults in their life that they're able to then go on to talk to and feel that they can express their emotions if there's an unsafe situation that they might be finding. Thinking about role playing, so engaging children in role playing scenarios in order to be able to practice saying no, and also telling a trusted adult something that they might be worried about, filtering in those concepts of telling the truth, even if that young person feel that they might have made a mistake or they might be in trouble, that it's still key to tell the truth no matter what, and any problem shared is a problem halved, or nothing that is too complicated that can't be fixed or solved. and looking at collaboration with parents, so that key communication with parents, keeping them informed about obviously the body safety curriculum, any online safety, encouraging them to have open discussions with their children and how they can then go and reinforce the messages that you guys might have within your settings, and how they can take these away and reinforce those at home and continue those discussions for a whole system approach in relation to that. And lastly, not to forget, obviously, professional support. Working in exploitation is difficult. It's a difficult topic to cover and often can be quite emotional and can have an emotional impact on professionals. So it's recognising and addressing that emotional impact that work can have, providing access to support and counselling services where necessary, and again maintaining that continuous learning and encouraging that ongoing professional development, learning around new trends and methods and how you can help work and disrupt that exploitation, taking part in multi-agency events and training, and again being able to reach out for sources of help and advice wherever that might be needed. Okay, next slide please, Kat. Okay, so I'm sure that I'm really conscious of time, so just looking at some of the resources that we've got available, we obviously have our Be Aware site that can be accessed via that QR code, and that will take you to all of our exploitation resources that's aimed for parents and carers and also young people as well. Next slide please, Kat. We've got our community partnership intelligence. So again, looking at that QR code, that will take you straight to the North Yorkshire Police Intelligence Reporting Form. Again, that information is really key into disruption of exploitation, and that portal's been really slimmed down and sort of simplified to make it as professional as friendly as possible. So if there's anything that you're professionally not comfortable with or anything suspicious, unusual activity, then please feel free to share that intelligence into North Yorkshire Police for extra support and guidance on that one. Next slide, please, Kat. And again, conscious that these slides will be shared with you. So these are just some QR codes for some key internet sites and extra resources, both on our website and some of our go-to external sites that obviously we would advocate could be really useful and provide some activities for yourselves to look at. Next slide, please, Kat. And then this last slide is again looking at some other key sites. Again, our go-to sites for any resources, help and advice that we obviously share within the partnership as well. And again, these sites can be shared with parents and carers as well if there's anything resource-wise that might be useful to in the background as well. And last slide, please, Kat. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for listening and taking part. Please do get in touch if you have any questions or queries. Appreciate that it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of quite a complicated and in-depth topic. But if there is anything that you do need help with, then obviously that's my email address there. More than happy to take on board any questions or queries. But again, those useful sites might be helpful to have a browse when the slides do get shared with you. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gemma. I mean, there is so much information there, and I know the work that you do is incredibly intense, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, one of the things to think about is it doesn't matter how many hours a child is attending your setting, you are providing safeguarding protection, you're providing that professional curiosity for however many hours, whether it's 3 hours a week or 40 hours a week, you know, you're providing that safeguarding for the length of time that child is in your setting for. And actually, Gemma, I don't know if you know, but last year we had the NSPCC came to this event. I think it was last autumn, and they did the pants. It was brand new, revised material that she presented last year. So again, that's still available. But I know Gemma's put the QR code. So again, please use that resource, share it with staff, share it with parents, because it is all about sort of making sure that the children know that those, their private parts are their own private parts, and that they can say no. So thank you so much, Gemma, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gemma. I'd like to say we will, if you need a little bit of time to kind of marinate on everything that Gemma's been talking about, we will keep it open for questions at the end. We have tried to collate all the resources for early years settings. We had requests from education providers around things that we could share as part of like PSHE sessions and stuff like that, and we have managed to find some resources, again linked to things like the pants rule and stuff like that, which we have collated on our Be Aware site. So if you get to the professionals page and go right down to the bottom, there's a section for schools and early years providers, and we've kind of broken it down into age ranges, and we've got an SEND section on there as well. Similarly, if you're using something that you think is a really good resource, let us know and we can pop that on there as well. And I think what we'll try and do is put some of those slides on that Gemma's done for those early years settings as well, because I think it's really useful to kind of capture it in that early years context. One thing I have put in the chat, we put a guide together for the sharing of intelligence. It's a really handy guide, if one to kind of print off and pop in your staff rooms, really. And what I would say to you is you're all members of communities. You know, nurseries are often hearts of communities, and you hear information about what's going on in your local areas. You'll pick up, you know, corridor conversations, you'll hear things from parents. And if you're starting to hear stuff that just doesn't quite sound right, you know, you're hearing about, actually, yeah, there's a group of kids and they're all hanging around here and somebody's showing up with a car. You might be that one person or the only person that's heard that. And it doesn't, if it doesn't sit right, please don't sit on it and hold it. You can use that intelligence sharing form to kind of just share those little niggles. And any of those kind of random questions you might have about, do I need consent to share it or anything like that, is all on that guide, and we've tried to make it as really easy for you as possible. But yes, thank you very much, Gemma. I'm going to move on to the next section of the evening now. So let me just move on to my slides. So we're going to touch for the next 10 minutes or so on a thematic review and a really important campaign that came out as a result of it, that we kind of launched late spring this year. I will just give you a little bit of a trigger warning. Just over the next couple of slides, I'm just going to talk about some learning that came out as part of this thematic review, just in relation to some quite significant injuries that happened with some young non-mobile infants. I'm not going to go into any specific detail, but obviously it can be quite a harrowing subject to consider when we're talking about little ones being harmed. So please do, if you need to take a couple of minutes away, please do that. Look after yourselves. And we'll make sure that you've got some time at the end, and I'm happy to debrief with anyone if they do feel like they need that time at the end of the session. So just with regards to the learning from the thematic review, so this was commissioned by the Partnership Executive to identify learning from 3 very similar cases of non-accidental injury to non-mobile infants. So all 3 of these cases were considered for the subject of a rapid review, which is a process that we have to follow as a partnership when we see that there's been a significant injury, and we have to try and pull out the learning from that. And these included recommendations for practice that were taken forward by the partnership. So we had 3 cases, like I said, that all kind of came through in quite quick succession. We had child N, who was a 3-month-old baby who was admitted into hospital with seizures, in inverted commas there, and investigations found that there was bleeding around the brain and a retinal hemorrhages, indicative of non-accidental injury. No previous safeguarding concerns have been raised about this baby, and there was features of the case included perceived feeding problems, maternal mental health, and there was perhaps a lack of information sharing between health professionals. When we looked at child R, this was a 4-week-old baby who was presented to medical professionals with a swelling to the thigh, and this was found to have been fractures to which was later investigations, we found fractures to the femur, ribs and upper arm. So again, features of this case included paternal history of adverse childhood experiences and parental mental health. So you'll start to see this common theme run through all 3 cases here. Child S, we had a 7-week-old baby presenting to health professionals with breathing difficulties. And again, upon investigation, there was found to be bleeds on the brain and rib fractures, again consistent with non-accidental injuries. Features of this case included parental mental health, potential neurodiversity in one parent, and the perceived feeding difficulties that was happening with baby. So let me just bring these up. So in terms of some of the key lines of inquiry that came out of the case, there were some key bits to kind of consider really. Firstly, in terms of how do health professionals explore with prospectives and new parents the impact of having a newborn infant, and how this can affect their mental health and emotional well-being. I say health professionals quite loosely here, because I think what we have to pull out the learning from this is any professional that is having contact with new parents or soon-to-be parents. Secondly, how do professionals work with families to ensure they receive coordinated postnatal support and guidance on infant feeding, specific to the needs of that particular family? How do health professionals recognise when additional support is required, and how are they able to respond to this within current commissioning arrangements? How do health professionals reach a shared understanding of any potential vulnerabilities in a family and then work collaboratively to ensure targeted and effective support? And then finally, in the first few months after the birth of an infant, how are the icon messages explored with parents such that they are supported to cope with normal infant crying? And how do professionals gain an understanding of individual families' experiences of crying? And finally, what areas of good practice are seen in these three cases, and how we can support the practitioners to adopt these more widely? So again, summary of some of the key areas of learning. We were looking at kind of developing professional skills, understanding and sharing information. So professionals felt confident to have conversations with new and expectant parents about the management of an unsettled infant, how to manage that kind of crying. There's the development of a clear pathway to support parents with mental health difficulties. I've popped a screen grab there. I can pop the link in the chat, but that is a really helpful tool to kind of show those different levels of intervention that are available for parents if and when they need them, and I think a really helpful resource for you guys to have in your settings. And again, that sharing of good practice, you know, we know there's some amazing things that are out there happening. People are having wonderful conversations with families and new and expectant parents. We want to capture that, and we want to kind of share that good practice right across the partnership. So this leads us to the hashtag Ask Me Have the Conversation campaign. So this is a professional based campaign, and it's all about encouraging conversation. It's not just about delivering those messages. You know, we've heard those messages. You've probably been told those messages as practitioners many times around safe sleep, infant crying and all that stuff. It's not about just kind of telling parents those messages. It's about having a conversation, giving parents an opportunity to talk about their worries, and professionals being curious about the lives of the people that they are supporting. So we've put together a collation of key resources around safe sleep. This is linked to obviously a very well-known campaign that we ran a couple of years ago around day or night sleep right, and national resources from like the Lullaby Trust and all the icon work. We did do a full masterclass learning event on this in spring this year, where we had our designated safeguarding nurses talk in a lot more detail about the thematic review and the learning that came out of it. I've obviously only just touched on it very briefly here for you today. And then we go into a lot more detail about Ask Me and how you can use Ask Me. So again, you can go back and access that via our YouTube channel, and you can use that as training with your staff, which is always really helpful for you guys. So alongside all the information and the web page, we produced a series of conversation starters or Ask Me's, but this is really just the tip of the iceberg, and we encourage professionals to remain curious and to consider the questions that they really need to ask to get that understanding of what life is like for that family. And again, the message is, this is for any professional who is seeing that family. So, you know, we've delivered this to primary and secondary school staff who might not necessarily work directly with the mother of a newborn baby, but might see the mother or father of a newborn baby at pick up or drop off and kind of see the challenges that they're facing, and may have that as an opportunity to ask how people are doing, and giving them the opportunity to share some of those concerns. And there's some additional things to consider. You know, think about how parents of multiple children, the impact that has. You know, you may have a family who has a slightly older child or toddler that's accessing your setting, and then family have another baby. How does that addition of a new baby change things in that family dynamic? You know, not just being parents, but being a partner as well. You know, there's real challenges to this, and I think often we see a lot of social media about how wonderful being a new parent is, and all the positive things, but I think some of that acknowledgement of actually it's really hard. Sometimes there are really difficult days, and I think as a parent, if you understand and know that there is a professional asking you these questions just from a place of caring and support and curiosity, not of judgment or shame, then I think that can be really helpful. Again, think about those parents who may not have parented or had a new baby in a while. So again, if you've got those older siblings and they've not had a few years, or even kind of if they're in primary or secondary settings and then a newborn comes along, we know that key messages around raising babies change a lot. How are they managing those changes? And again, take these opportunities to be curious about changes. So if you're having conversations with parents at pick up and drop off, and they're saying, oh yeah, we're going away for the weekend, we're going to see family friends, just ask some of those curious questions about how they're going to manage those changes in routine. How are they managing those safe sleep arrangements? You know, just things like, have you got yourself a travel cot? Because it's things like that. You might hear people saying, oh, we're planning on co-sleeping, or we're planning on doing that. And you can start to deliver some of those safer sleeping messages that may help. Again, whether or not there's a parent or mum or dad or anyone in the house is smoking, and that links back to our who's in charge, you know, smoking or in drink. How is that in terms of how are they managing this safely around the child? And there's some mindfulness and curiosity about if a family may have suffered a previous bereavement of a child. You know, having a new baby may have a really big impact on how they're feeling, and may resurface some of that bereavement or trauma. We have spoken with families who have sadly suffered infant bereavement as part of this campaign, and they shared some of these key questions with us that they felt would have the biggest impact. So it's just really a campaign of consideration, something for you to kind of go back and speak to your teams about, just to raise awareness, but maybe just think about some of those scenarios. You know, think about the fact that in the next couple of months, we've got Christmas coming up. We've got a lot of people who are travelling, moving to stay with family and friends, and you know, just some of that curiosity around how they're managing that, how it's going to impact on sleeping arrangements, things like that. So yeah, that's it for the campaign. Please do have a look on the webpage. Again, professionals at the top, there's a drop down and you can access that on the campaign section, which will take you to the webpage, which has got all the key resources. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to hand over to Helen.
Lovely, thank you, Kat, so much. I think one of our very first masterclass, oh sorry, they're not masterclasses anymore, are they? Our learning sessions, I don't know when we first started doing these, about 3 years ago. Karen Hedgley actually came and did a whole presentation on sort of icon and safe sleeping. So I think if that's still there, it'll still be on the our website, won't
yeah,
it?
and we do have, like I say, the day or night sleep right, again, it's very much focused around the safe sleeping messages, and it links in really nicely with the Ask Me campaign. So we do have all those resources. We've collated them all, and there's some really lovely things that you can print out. There's some leaflets that you can pass to mum or dad or grandparent if they're staying with grandparents. So you know, it's accessible resources, and basically it means that you're not going into these conversations kind of a bit like, oh, I don't really know what to say. We've got it all there for you, so it should be kind of fairly accessible.
Yeah, because it is difficult, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So Thank you ever so much. We're coming to the close of the evening. I know it's a really, really heavy session, so thank you ever so much for sticking with us. It's not the most sort of uplifting sort of topic, but very, very essential. Before I just go into my slides, I just want to share something with you, just to make you aware that the Safeguarding Partnership as a whole, we're going to have a joint targeted area inspection. So what that means is that there's going to be, it's like an Ofsted inspection. There will be Ofsted inspectors there. There'll also be inspectors from the police there, from social care, from sort of probation, all that kind of thing. So it's a very big sort of multi-agency inspection. The focus on this time, which is really pertinent to us in our field, is it's the focus on babies from unborn children up to 7 years old, and especially for those children living in families where there's been where there is or has been domestic abuse. So again, it's the impact on those children, you know, what sort of Gemma was saying earlier, you know, the signs. I think what we've heard all the way through all of the presentations so far is that professional curiosity, and again, that's going to be something that the inspectors sort of will be looking at. They will be coming out, they will be sort of picking children, and because it's a 0 to 7 focus, we know that the way that they'll break down the age groups is the unborn children, then the 0 to 2s, 2 to 4s, and then sort of like from 4 to sort of 7 or 5 to 7. And they will want to speak to frontline practitioners. So, you know, I'm just sort of giving you the heads up, although I hate that expression, that this is happening, and we probably will be coming to some of you, you know, when the inspectors have identified which children they actually want to look at, because certainly it's about how everybody's worked together, that multi-agency approach, the professional curiosity, and sort of how early years providers, what information is available for you. So that's, I just wanted to, that was a meeting that we had this afternoon, so that's why it's not on any of my slides. So next slide, please, Kat.
Yeah, Helen, I've just popped in this chat for people. It might be useful. We put a 1-minute guide together around what a JTI is, what it looks like, what it involves for partners. They changed the theme of a JTI, so we don't get inspected every time for every theme, but the last one was around serious youth violence, and we did a bit of a mock, a bit of a dummy run, and kind of what the processes would involve. We do have the learning from that if anyone's interested in it. I'm sure I can share the links. So that it may kind of link to serious youth violence, but you'll see the process and what it involves. And then obviously if we are called for one in relation to domestic abuse, we'll make sure all the guidance is available for everybody.
Yeah. Fabulous.
I'll move on to the next one for you.
Lovely, thank you, Kat. So starting on a real positive, I just wanted to share some good news that since our last safeguarding meeting, we've had 9 outstanding inspections. In fact, actually, since I did these slides on the 1st of October, I think it was, we've had another 3 outstanding inspections in the county, and we've got 2 inadequate outstanding inspection reports. So next slide, please. I'm sure if you've had an inspection since the new framework, that actually the overall sort of heading is that by the inspector, that there's an open and positive culture around safeguarding. But what I've just done here is I've just picked out some of the quotes from the Ofsted inspectors, because you can see that in the outstanding reports how highly sort of children's safety, their well-being, all of that, you know, staff professional development, clear safeguarding systems in place, clear key person systems in place. All of that comes out in outstanding inspection reports. So I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please, Kat. On the not so good, on the inadequate inspection reports, again, it comes out where there isn't a positive culture around safeguarding. And some of the things here, again, these are lifted directly from reports. some of the things that Andy touched on, but also sort of those sort of what I would class as basics about sort of making sure that those checks have been done for, you know, it says here about staff hadn't had the suitability checks done, and yet they were left alone with children. So again, I won't read them out. They're there, you'll get the slides and everything. But again, it's just those fundamentals that please make sure that, you know, everything that's in that section 3 of the EYFS, you know, is sort of happening in your provision. Next slide, please. So we're just going to play a YouTube clip here. So I just want to, if you've seen this before, you probably know what's coming, but I just want to say that, again, it's not an easy, can you go back? Thanks, Kat. It's not an easy watch, but I think it's a very, very useful clip. And it just shows how within sort of a very, very short period of time, what happens to a child when they swallow a button battery. And again, it's just raising this awareness with parents in your own setting. Oh, Kat, we've lost the slides.
Yeah, I'm just changing the screen so we can access the video.
Okay,
sorry.
Fabulous. And obviously, as Kat was saying, as Christmas is coming up, lots more toys with button batteries in, and we know that there are dangers with those, and knowing what to do. You know, a child goes straight to A&E, take the packaging with them. Don't make them eat or drink anything, and don't make them be sick. So if we can just get that YouTube clip up, that would be fabulous. So like I say, thank you.
All it took was a tiny watch battery to devastate this little girl's health. After she swallowed the button battery, it burned through Valeria's food and windpipes. This is the latest of many operations at London's Great Ormond Street Hospital to try to repair the damage. For the past year, the 3-year-old has been fed through a tube into her stomach and has a bag to collect her saliva. Her mother, Jelena, who's Russian, says it has turned their lives upside down. She hopes Valeria will eventually recover.
Essentially, this battery starts working in the esophagus.
Surgeons at Great Ormond Street Hospital are seeing one child a month with caustic soda burns caused by button batteries.
The most important thing is to be aware that these are extremely dangerous and should be treated essentially like a poison and be kept out of the reach of children.
Let's mimic what can happen when a button battery gets lodged in a child's throat. The ham represents the delicate lining of the esophagus, and water, saliva. I'll cover this side, but put another battery here so we can see the chemical reaction that happens. We've left this for just 2 hours, and already a huge amount of damage has been done. If I lift the button battery, you can see all this black marked area. Eventually, this would have burnt its way right through the ham. Same thing with the child's throat.
Look, when I turn the clock.
When Amari from Newcastle swallowed a button battery last year, doctors warned her mum there could be life-changing injuries.
They said that her vocal cords could be damaged then and there, and she would never actually, in fact, develop a voice. And again, they'd said that if she did pull through, she may never eat again because the esophagus may have been too badly damaged. Just truly terrifying.
Getting ready for her party today.
Fortunately, the 2-year-old has made a complete recovery, but it's a warning to parents to keep toddlers away from button batteries. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Thank you, Kat. So I know it's not an easy watch, and I am sorry. So if it has upset people, but and obviously, as Kat said, we are here if anybody wants to have a chat about anything. Could we go back to the slides if possible, Kat, please? That's lovely, thank you. But yeah, it is just raising that awareness. And then the next thing, just want to, this is obviously making quite big news again, are these water beads, and how dangerous these are for children as well. So again, if you have these in your provision currently, I would strongly recommend that you sort of get rid of them. Next slide, please, Kat. This just shows sort of like what happens if a child swallows one of these water beads, and how actually it really does sort of swell up, and obviously can again block the throat and everything. So again, just be aware of that. And the next slide, please, Kat. So this again is just a poster that CAPT have released. I think I've shared it on previous key messages. I think it went out on not today's key messages, but I think maybe October's or whatever. So I mean, if you've got this, pop it up in your settings, just to again raise that awareness. And if not, it's available. You can just Google it and just sort of download it and share it again with parents. And so actually that is the end of our presentation for this evening. So I'd just like to thank everybody again for coming. Really appreciate you giving up your Wednesday evening when you've had a hard day at work. And again, thank you to all the presenters, to Kat, to Gemma, to Andy, and we are here. If anybody's got any questions, we've left a little bit of time. We've got 6 minutes, so we actually are on time. So we've got if you wanted to either pop anything left in the chat bar, or if anybody wants to come, we'll stop recording sort of now. So then if anybody wanted to sort of stay behind and ask any questions,